Ethan Calloway, a billionaire with everything except an heir, is devastated to learn he's sterile. Just when he's lost all hope, a courageous black woman named Grace, who once saved his life, changes his world in a way he never expected. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel so you never miss an episode like this one. In his glass-walled office on the 47th floor of Carroll Holdings, Ethan Calloway sat in a world of silence. The Chicago skyline stretched beneath him, a city he had conquered, a monument to his ambition. One of the wealthiest tycoons in the country, he had everything money could buy. But today, none of it mattered. At 40, Ethan had reached every milestone he'd set for himself, except one. He had no legacy to leave behind, no child to carry his name. At precisely 6 p.m., his phone rang. "Mr. Calloway," said Dr. Gavin, the fertility specialist, his voice heavy. "I have your results. I'm afraid it's conclusive. You're sterile." The word hit him like a punch. Sterile. His legacy, his future, his purpose, gone. Refusing to accept it, Ethan begged the doctor to rerun the tests. He pleaded, even offered to pay anything for a solution. But Dr. Gavin's voice remained gentle and resolute. "There are some things money can't change, Mr. Calloway." Ethan's world spun. He needed to escape. Rain lashed the city as he tore through the streets of downtown Chicago, his mind consumed with frustration and denial. At a slick turn, his car skidded. Headlights, horns, screeching brakes. Then, darkness. The first thing Ethan saw when he blinked open his eyes was a woman's face. Calm, steady, determined. Her name was Grace Morales. She'd been driving home from her job as a high school teacher on Chicago's South Side when she spotted the crash. Without hesitation, she raced to his wrecked car, pulling him out moments before the vehicle caught fire. In the hospital, Ethan couldn't get her face out of his mind. He needed to find her, to thank her. He called his assistant, Hannah. What he learned surprised him. Grace wasn't just a teacher. She mentored at-risk youth, volunteered at shelters, and devoted her life to helping others. Curiosity turned into admiration. As soon as he was well enough, Ethan arranged to meet her. Grace was reserved, but kind. Ethan, used to polished smiles and hidden agendas, was disarmed by her authenticity, her strength, her quiet courage. Weeks passed, and Grace's image lingered in his mind. She had saved his life, but had also awakened something deeper. Finally, he reached out. He invited her to dinner. They met at a modest bistro on the South Side, Grace's choice. The place was warm and relaxed, a far cry from the luxury Ethan was used to. Wearing his tailored suit, he felt strangely out of place. Grace, in a simple navy dress and a warm smile, looked effortlessly composed. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," Ethan said, trying to mask the nervous edge in his voice. Grace smiled softly. "I wasn't sure you'd actually call. I figured you might forget about the stranger who pulled you from a car wreck." He shook his head, genuinely surprised. "Not likely. I owe you my life, Grace. I want to get to know the woman who saved me." Conversation flowed easily. Ethan was captivated by Grace's stories, of her students, her work, her community. She spoke with passion and conviction, describing the struggles and triumphs of those she served. It was a kind of purpose Ethan had rarely encountered in his world, a world where status and wealth ruled everything. Her compassion, her fire, her quiet grace. It stirred something in him. Then, as the meal was winding down, Grace's expression shifted. She hesitated, folded her hands on the table. "There's something I've been meaning to share," she said, her voice calm but steady. I'm pregnant. With twins." Ethan's face registered genuine surprise, but he quickly masked it, leaning in with interest rather than judgment. "Twins, wow," he managed, feeling his heart race. The news was unexpected, but something in him shifted. A feeling he couldn't quite name took root. Deep, almost instinctual. a sudden urge to protect. Seeing his calm reaction, Grace continued. I only found out a few weeks ago, she said softly. It's just been a lot to process. On my own. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. I know it must sound strange. I wasn't expecting any of this. Ethan nodded, understanding more than she realized. I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be, he said, his voice warm. But you don't have to go through it alone. Grace gave him a small smile, but then dropped her gaze to her hands, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. I appreciate that, Ethan. But I don't want you to feel obligated. I don't want to become a project. The word stung. Ethan understood where it came from. Grace had lived her life relying on herself. Depending on someone like him, a wealthy businessman from a vastly different world, likely felt unsettling. You're not a project, he said gently, leaning forward. If anything, you're probably the most genuine person I've met in a long time. They finished their dinner with laughter and stories, an effortless connection forming between them. Ethan was intrigued by Grace's resilience and honesty, qualities he rarely saw in the business world. By the time they said goodbye, he felt more alive than he had in years. In the days that followed, Grace was constantly on his mind. He thought about her laugh, her strength, her stories, the way she stood tall despite all she was carrying. And more than anything, he felt a growing desire to be there for her, not just for the practical challenges of pregnancy, but for the quiet burdens she carried, the judgment, the loneliness. Determined to stay close, Ethan began visiting her regularly. Always careful not to overwhelm, he found small ways to show support. He brought thoughtful gifts, prenatal vitamins, a set of comfortable pillows, a book on parenting twins. Always delivered with a casual tone, like it was no big deal. Grace would roll her eyes playfully, but he saw the gratitude behind them. They met in parks, cozy cafes, anywhere Grace felt comfortable. Over time, she began to open up, sharing her fears, her dreams, even her doubts about raising 2 children on her own. In return, Ethan let his guard down too. He spoke about his condition, the devastation of learning he was sterile, and the quiet unraveling of the future he once imagined. With Grace, he didn't have to be Ethan Callaway, CEO. He could just be, and it felt freeing. One evening, after a long walk through the park, they sat on a bench watching the sun dip below the skyline. Grace turned to him, her expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. Ethan, I have to ask, why are you doing all this? You hardly know me. Ethan looked at her, his gaze soft and open. Maybe I don't know everything about you, Grace, he said, but I know enough. You're remarkable, and I think maybe I'm meant to be here, not out of obligation, but because I want to be. Grace searched his face. What she saw there was real, and for the first time, she allowed herself to lean into his support, resting her head gently on his shoulder. Together, they watched the Chicago skyline bathed in twilight. A peaceful silence wrapped around them. For Ethan, the connection defied logic. It wasn't something he could explain. He just knew, deep down, that he wanted to be there for Grace and her twins. And for Grace, the weight of doing it alone began to lift, replaced by something quieter and much harder to find: comfort. Word of Ethan's involvement with Grace eventually reached his family, particularly his sister, Miranda. To her, Grace was an outsider, someone unworthy of the Callaway name. To Ethan's dismay, Miranda even tried to pay Grace to walk away. When Grace found out, she was hurt, confused. She confronted Ethan, explaining, gently but firmly, that while she appreciated his kindness, their worlds were different. Too different. Maybe this was always temporary, she said. Maybe it was never meant to work beyond the moment. Ethan's heart sank. He realized how much of his life had been shaped by expectations, by rules and appearances. And in that moment, he questioned it all. He wasn't ready to lose her. I don't care what the world expects of me, he said, reaching for her hand. I only care about you. Please give me a chance. And she agreed. Read it. but asked for space to think about what this connection meant. It had been a crisp autumn morning. Ethan was halfway through a board meeting when his phone buzzed. He was about to ignore it, but when he saw Grace's name flashing on the screen, a chill ran down his spine. Grace never called during work hours. The voice on the other end wasn't hers. Mr. Calloway? Miss Morales has been admitted to Chicago Presbyterian Hospital. She's gone into premature labor. Ethan's heart dropped. But she's not due for another 2 months. His voice wavered. Without waiting for a response, he shot up, muttered an apology to the board members, and left the room, ignoring their questioning stares. The world outside blurred as he rushed out of the office and into his car, his mind racing. Memories flooded back. His own mother lost during childbirth when he was just a toddler. The fear gripped him tighter with each passing second. He clenched the wheel as he sped through the city streets, desperate to reach the hospital. When he arrived, a nurse quickly guided him to the maternity ward. He could already hear Grace's cries from down the hall. A pang of helplessness pierced him. As he approached her room, he saw her in the hospital bed, her face etched with pain and worry. "Ethan," she breathed, relief flickering in her eyes. "I'm here," he said, rushing to her side and gripping her hand tightly. "You're not alone. I'm right here." In the hours that followed, they endured a grueling, tense wait. The medical staff moved quickly, monitoring Sophia and the twins with laser focus. Every beep of the machines, every hushed exchange between nurses, tightened the knot in Ethan's chest. He could do nothing but hold Grace's hand, whispering words of comfort as she fought through each contraction. Finally, after what felt like forever, a nurse ushered him out of the room as the team prepared for an emergency C-section. "Please," he pleaded, "let me stay with her." "Mr. Calloway, we need to focus," the nurse said, firm but kind. "We'll bring you in once they're here. I promise." She led him to the waiting room. Ethan paced back and forth, glancing at the clock every few seconds. Time dragged. At last, a nurse appeared, her face calm but weary. "Mr. Calloway, they're here," she said softly. "You have 2 daughters." Ethan's chest tightened. He nodded and followed her to the neonatal ICU, his heart pounding. Inside, the sight struck him like a wave. 2 tiny incubators stood side by side, each holding a fragile pink bundle swaddled in cloth. Wires and tubes surrounded them, monitors beeping steadily with each heartbeat and breath. The nurse led him to the first incubator, where the smaller of the 2 lay. "This is Lucy," she said gently. Ethan stared, tears filling his eyes. Her face was so delicate, her fingers no bigger than the tip of his own. Her tiny chest rose and fell with shallow, determined breaths. Then, the nurse led him to the second incubator. "And this is Eli." ISA was slightly bigger than her sister, but still impossibly fragile. Tubes circled her too, her skin a soft, translucent pink. Ethan stood frozen, overcome with emotion. "They'll be in the ICU for a while," the nurse explained. "But they're fighters. We'll do everything we can to help them grow stronger." He placed a trembling hand on the glass, heart swelling with a fierce protectiveness he hadn't known he possessed. "Hi, Lucy." "Hi, Ella," he whispered, voice thick with tears. "Daddy's here." In the days that followed, Ethan barely left the NICU. He took an immediate leave of absence from work, surprising everyone, including his assistant, who had never seen him take a day off. But none of that mattered. His world had narrowed to this small, sterile room, where his daughters lay fighting for every breath. Grace, still recovering from her surgery, joined him whenever she could, though the ordeal had left her weak. Whenever she came, Ethan was there, holding her hand, offering strength. They sat in silence often, watching their girls through the glass, united in love and in worry. One evening, after Grace had fallen asleep in her hospital room, Ethan sat beside Lucy's incubator, gazing at her in awe. She was so small, and yet so determined. He spoke to her in a hushed voice, sharing stories of his childhood, his dreams, his fears, things he had never shared with anyone else, things he hadn't dared to admit even to himself. "Lucy, your dad used to think he had everything figured out. He thought he needed to control everything, to plan every step. But then you came along, you and ISA, and you showed me there's a different way to live." He looked over at ISA's incubator, where his other tiny daughter lay, barely stirring. "You two are already teaching me more than I could ever teach you." Hours turned into days, and Ethan found a new rhythm. He became adept at reading the baby's monitors, learning to recognize the signs of progress, celebrating the smallest milestones. The first time they opened their eyes, the first time they held his finger with their impossibly small hands. The nurses grew used to seeing Ethan at their sides. He read softly to the twins from classic children's books, sang lullabies he barely remembered from his own childhood. He had never considered himself the type to sing, especially not in public, but in that quiet room with his daughters, it just felt right. One afternoon, a nurse caught Ethan sitting beside ISA, reading softly from The Little Prince. He hadn't noticed her approach until she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "They seem to like your voice, Mr. Calloway," she said with a warm smile. He looked up, surprised. "Do you think they know I'm here?" "Oh, they know," she replied, glancing affectionately at the twins. Babies can sense love, even from the start. Ethan felt his heart swell. For so long, he had believed his legacy would be in his wealth, his company, his empire. But now, as he watched Lucy and ISA sleeping peacefully, he realized his true legacy was right here, in these tiny, fragile lives. He would do anything to protect them. Every day, his attachment grew deeper. With each breath they took, each tiny movement, he felt an overwhelming surge of love and responsibility. He wanted to give them the world, to be there for every step, every laugh, every tear. One evening, after Grace had visited and returned to her room, Ethan stayed behind, lost in thought. He placed his hand on the glass of the incubators, watching his daughters sleep. A promise formed in his heart, a vow he hadn't expected to make. "I'll be here for you, Lucy. ISA, no matter what. I'll be here, every step of the way." In that quiet room, surrounded by beeping monitors and dim lights, Ethan Calloway, the powerful CEO who once measured life by success and control, became a father. Fully, completely, and irrevocably devoted to the two little lives that had changed his world forever. Back home, Ethan reflected on what legacy truly meant. These twins weren't his by blood, but the love he felt for them was stronger than any tie he'd ever known. Public opinion shifted as people noticed the change in him, from ruthless CEO to devoted father. Photos of him cradling the twins in the park went viral, reshaping his image overnight. But Ethan didn't care about the media buzz. For the first time, he was genuinely content. He knew the next step was to adopt Lucy and ISA. "They're already mine," he told Grace. "In every way that matters. I want to make it official." Touched, Grace agreed, recognizing the depth of his commitment. As Lucy and ISA approached their first birthday, Ethan and Grace marveled at how quickly time had flown by. The journey from the NICU to this point had been filled with sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and countless small moments that quietly transformed them. They had created a family in a way neither had imagined. Now, on the brink of the twins' first birthday, Ethan was ready to take their commitment to the next level. In the weeks leading up to the celebration, he found himself making plans he never thought he'd make. The man who had once believed love was an afterthought, something secondary to his career, was now planning a proposal. He didn't want grand gestures or lavish promises. He wanted something that honored the life they had built together, simple, real, and full of love. Grace had chosen the venue for the birthday party, a quaint, cozy community center nestled in their neighborhood, surrounded by gardens and shaded by old oak trees. She loved the place for its charm and warmth. It reminded her of her childhood, where simplicity and closeness mattered more than material wealth. Ethan could see how much it meant to her, and it only solidified his resolve to make his proposal a reflection of the same values. On the day of the twins' birthday celebration, the community center buzzed with friends, family, and the joyful laughter of children. Decorations filled the room, bright balloons, streamers, and handmade banners that Grace had crafted herself, adding a personal touch to every corner. At the center of it all was a small cake with Lucy and ISA written in colorful icing. Their tiny, delicate hands were already reaching for it as Grace held them in her lap. From across the room, Ethan watched her, captivated. There was something pure and gentle in the way she cradled their daughters, the love in her eyes spilling over as she kissed each of their foreheads. In that moment, he felt a surge of emotion he couldn't contain. This was the life he wanted, right here. A life not about power or wealth, but about connection, love, and presence. As the guests mingled and celebrated, Ethan took a deep breath. He felt the small ring box in his pocket, its weight heavy, like it carried every unspoken promise, every quiet dream he hadn't dared say aloud. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times. But now, standing in the middle of it, he knew words alone couldn't carry the depth of what he felt. After the cake had been cut and the room had settled into a soft hum of conversation and laughter, Ethan gently took Grace's hand and led her to a quieter corner. The warmth of her hand steadied him. She looked at him with curiosity and love, sensing something unspoken in his eyes. "Grace," he began, his voice soft but sure. "I never thought I'd find a love like this. You and the girls, you've changed my life in ways I can't explain." He paused, taking a deep breath as the weight of the moment settled around them. "I used to think success was about numbers and buildings, about leaving behind something people would remember. But you showed me that legacy is something different. It's about the lives we touch, the love we give." Grace's eyes welled with tears, her hand trembling in his. Ethan continued, his voice filled with sincerity. "I want to spend my life building that kind of legacy with you. Not in boardrooms or skyscrapers, but here, in moments like this, surrounded by the people we love." He reached into his pocket and knelt down. "Grace, will you marry me?" A tear slipped down her cheek. Her chest filled with warmth, so deep it stole her voice for a moment. She nodded, finally whispering, "Yes, Ethan. Yes, I will." Cheers erupted from nearby as friends and family, who had caught the proposal from a distance, clapped and embraced them. Joyous laughter filled the room. The twins, blissfully unaware of the moment's significance, clapped their little hands too, smiling at the sound. Ethan scooped them up, one in each arm. Grace wrapped her arms around all three of them. The four of them locked in a tender embrace, surrounded by love. The celebration continued, but now, it carried a deeper meaning. Guests toasted not only to the twins' first year of life, but to a new chapter in Ethan and Grace's journey. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the last guests said their goodbyes, Ethan and Grace stayed behind at the community center. The whirlwind had passed, and now came the quiet. They sat on a small bench outside, the warm glow of the setting sun casting golden light across the garden. Ethan held Grace's hand, feeling the steady comfort of her presence beside him. As he looked at the garden, at the center where their daughters had just taken their first steps into the world, he felt peace settle over him. For so many years, he had measured his worth in achievements, wealth, deals, legacies carved into glass and steel. But now, looking at Grace, at their two sleeping daughters nestled in her arms, he knew his true legacy wasn't in buildings or business. It was right here. He leaned over, gently kissed Grace's forehead, and whispered, "This is my legacy, Grace. You, Lucy, and ISA. This is the life I want to build." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "And it's more than enough, Ethan," she whispered back. "It always has been." As the last light of the day faded and the stars began to bloom in the night sky, Ethan held his family close. knowing they had built something far more lasting and beautiful than he had ever dreamed. A year later, in the quiet of their new Chicago home, Ethan held Lucy and Isa in his arms. His life had been transformed in ways he never imagined. The man who once measured success in contracts and control now saw it in late-night feedings, in small hands tugging at his shirt, in Grace's laugh over breakfast. He and Grace had embraced a new life, built not on blood, but on love, resilience, and the choices they made together. Through every twist and challenge, they had created a bond that redefined legacy and revealed what true devotion looks like. But what would you do in Ethan's position? If your life changed in a single moment, would you open your heart to a new kind of family? Or if you were Grace, would you take a chance on someone from a world so different from your own? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you'd navigate a story as unexpected as this one. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts.